But yeah, new creative team as Chris Claremont takes over at issue 90. While the other changes in creative team had been relatively seamless, there's something about the transition into Claremont that feels off. It could be the fact that for the first time in the book, a storyline is 5 issues long. The world tour was made up of several 2 or 3-parters. It could be that the first issue he writes is a little awkward in the dialogue, although that's to be expected as a new writer has to get used to these voices. It could be the way they talk, since Claremont will have a character loudly talking to themselves. It could be the characters suddenly having a training session out of nowhere, something they have never done before, and I really can't emphasize enough that it happens out of nowhere. They're saying goodbye to someone, then bam, training begins now! And never really needed training because they've always operated pretty dang well together, even when a new character joins up. It could also be that Claremont began sidelining long-standing characters of the book for his own preferred ones, but we'll get to that later, although all the Exiles writers had swapped out characters before. I do have to agree about the length of storylines, at least. Simply put, as cool as some of these alternate universe concepts were, they were really not compelling enough to support lasting for 5 issues. Even if you count the world tour as a 13-parter, they at least visited lots of different places to keep things fresh. But yeah, issue 90. During a prediction scenario that shows what would happen if Proteus regains control of Morph, they see an image of a woman at the end that they can't identify, and the computers can't lock onto. This is just a hint for a later crossover. Power Princess decides to return to the Squadron Supreme to resume her duties, really for no other reason than, time to go. The mission they go on goes badly, with only Sabretooth managing to return to the Crystal Palace. They recruit the Psylocke from Earth 616 because the computer systems say she's their best bet for this, although that seems contradictory since no technology can actually detect her. She has telekinesis, telepathy, and psionic weapons. I should note that she's recruited in issue 91 without anyone actually telling her any details. They don't tell her about the Exiles, what their regular job is, why she's apparently needed, just that she is, and she accepts that. In fact, despite it being issue 91, we're not sure what the problem is or what's going on in this world other than a destroyed city, and Susan Storm is apparently Madam Hydra, with the ability to brainwash people into her sway. She also has command over the Hand, a ninja clan usually associated with Elektra and Daredevil. We later learn that the population of Earth is gone, 1 billion people rescued by Reed Richards and 5 billion more dead, but nothing else. No backstory about why Susan Storm became Madam Hydra, why she's so evil and yet Reed is still Reed. There's nothing. It's 5 issues of Psylocke expositing about her own backstory, and mostly just fight scenes. They have to kill Reed Richards, or else his dimension-hopping technology will fall into Susan Storm's hands. If they don't do this, the Crystal Palace apparently has the ability to delete the entire universe to prevent it from happening. That part I can believe, considering the bugs were able to do irreparable harm to other universes using the advanced tech they didn't fully understand. But we only get parts of this in tiny bits of exposition. It's like whole parts of the story have been deleted in order to... And that's why Mr. T will be the best participant in Dancing with the Stars ever. The end result is that the universe seemingly gets destroyed with the Exiles still on it. But they're saved by Reed Richards, who somehow just had the universe blink out of existence and then come back. Again, characters will loudly exposit about their personal issues and emotions, but not about bigger concerns like how and why things happen. In any event, they're unable to contact Heather, and I presume Reed Richards is able to send them back to the Panopticon using the Talus. Unfortunately, the place is deserted. It's dark, the bugs are gone, and so is Heather and the equipment she brought back with her from her own universe. They're contacted by Icon, a hologram of Heather that's apparently a security protocol. Don't recall Icon? What? She's always been there! Yeah, your guess is as good as mine, people. She just showed up during the previous arc, no explanation of who the hell she was, and everyone treats her like she's always been there. It's not a plot point or anything. Claremont just seemed allergic to exposition that wasn't about Psylocke. Fortunately, it is able to explain what the hell happened in their absence. Heather drank herself into a stupor because of the loss of everyone she thought was dead. Eventually, the bugs just got tired of waiting for her to move past her grief and left. Yeah, after everything that happened, all the time that they had spent with the Exiles project, constantly badgering our heroes during the world tour to resume their work, continual outrage over the state of the multiverse, the Omniverse, as Claremont now keeps referring to it, they just decided to cut their losses and leave. Suddenly, I can believe that they came up with such an idiotic cover story for the Time Broker. Heather eventually got her act together and repaired all the damage to the Crystal Palace, but after what happened to the others, she was done with this, deciding someone else could try to fix the damage, going back to her own reality. The time differential between universes was about 6 months, so they get to work getting back to work. They get in touch with Heather, but she's gotten pregnant in the meantime and decides to completely retire from Exiles duty. Psylocke decides to act as the team coordinator in the Crystal Palace while she adjusts to working with the others. And along with everyone else, we're never given an explanation why she's still sticking around and not going back home, as the Exiles have to deal with a world that seems like it's in a utopian state. Victor Von Doom is leader of the Fantastic Four. People aren't afraid of people who look a little different, except according to Reed Richards, who is the Mole Man in this reality, it's all a big lie. Doom has taken control of the Earth and either gotten rid of anyone he didn't like, or altered the genetics of people who act in ways he disapproves of. Back in the Crystal Palace, a younger version of Kitty Pryde appears out of nowhere. She calls herself Cat, claiming that all she did was phase through a wall and ended up here. There's also this very weird subplot about a man and a woman who appear to Psylocke and say that all of creation is going to unravel. And if Claremont is bad at giving exposition, you can imagine characters are just as bad, because they don't give any more details than that. Longshot is the only one among the Exiles who suspects that something is wrong with this world, possibly because of his backstory related to Mojo. Unfortunately, it's a little too late. Doom manages to scan the Talus and decides to bring other universes under his control, sending agents into the Crystal Palace. They get a hold of Psylocke and Cat, but help arrives in a most unexpected form. Thunderbird, who has finally awoken from his coma and gotten out of the Crystal Palace wall. He helps save Cat and Psylocke, who are of course as much in the dark as he is, since, well, they're new and he's been out of action for 80 issues. Once again, the situation ends up being resolved with no real explanation of what the hell happened. I think we're meant to infer that Reed Richards broadcasts a command from Doom that gets everyone on this Earth to kill themselves. But it's really, really vague. And we never actually learn what the hell their mission was. And somehow this blows up the Earth. That's 2 missions in a row where the Earth is seemingly, if not outright, destroyed. Maybe Heather had the right idea and it's time to retire. The destruction of the Earth interferes with the teleportation signal to bring the Exiles back, scattering them across different realities like it happened once before. It's not that interesting though, and a lot of stuff apparently happens off-panel. Morph ends up recruiting a version of Rogue into the Exiles, while Spider-Man ends up retiring with some alternate reality Mary Jane Watson. This is in spite of the fact that Miguel is, not Peter. Yeah, Claremont seemed a bit confused about that, because in the Doom world, he apparently also fell in love with a version of Gwen Stacy. Overnight! I thought it was just Doom messing with his head like he did everybody else, but nope! That was a thing that happened. Sabretooth ends up recruiting a male version of Mystique called, Mystique? Whatever, it doesn't have a U and an E at the end. Because poor literacy is just a sign you're in another dimension. If it seems like I'm being very quick and unspecific about a lot of this, that's because there really isn't much to talk about. Like I said, there's no actual recruitment that we see, just characters meeting and then suddenly later they're part of the team. Hell, Mystique's appearance changes between issues. I mean, he's a shapeshifter, so that's not too unusual, but come on! We also get some more of the mysterious man and woman, who claim they created several parallel realities. This comes out of nowhere and is never really followed up on. We don't even get to see a reaction from the others over Thunderbird being okay again. Oh, and lest I forget, Heather apparently just left Thunderbird there in the abandoned Crystal Palace. Thanks for that one, Heather! But fortunately, there would be some happy reunions for characters. Just, again, not in the way you'd expect. Before issue 100, and much like Chuck Austen, there was a mini-series crossover between Exiles and New Excalibur, that group I mentioned Nocturne had joined, and the other book that Chris Claremont was writing. X-Men Die by the Sword is a 5-issue story that serves as a conclusion to the two series. Well, sort of, since Exiles would actually go on, but apparently closed out the first volume, despite it taking place before issue 100. The good news is that it features the reunion between Nocturne and Thunderbird. In the intermediate time, Nocturne had a stroke, something quite rare in comics, actual realistic medical conditions occurring in characters and having to deal with the after effects of it. Oh, and by the way, the recap pages for issues 3, 4, and 5 of the mini misspell Rogue's name as Rouge, because poor literacy is sometimes just bad proofreading. Look, the point is that X-Men Die by the Sword is really more for fans of New Excalibur, since I had no clue what the hell was going on. I'm sure it would make a lot more sense if I was a reader of New Excalibur, but it involves an interdimensional team of Captain Britain's weird cosmic beings wanting ultimate power, fighting against other people who claim to be protectors of the Omniverse, and this guy who wears that suit and many others like it.
There. Sure glad I don't look stupid in this.
The end results of this are that Longshot regains his memories and reunites with Dazzler, whom he had a relationship with. Nocturne rejoins the team to be with Thunderbird for like 5 minutes, but I'll get into that. And a character named Sage from New Excalibur joins up with the Exiles because of reasons. I don't know. She's an established 616 character that I had never heard of before. Longtime X-Men stuff, but as I've said numerous times now, I'm not an X-Men fan. My apologies if you're a fan of hers, but me, when Exiles got to this point, I pretty much stopped reading. I didn't actually read Die by the Sword at the time because I knew I'd be absolutely lost since I wasn't a New Excalibur reader. And shock of all shocks, I was completely lost when I read it for this retrospective. Let's cover one last thing before we move on to Exiles number 100 and the next thing that happened to the group. So, that mysterious man and woman, the final pages of Die by the Sword do finally explain who they are. Sort of. Not really. They are a tribute to Marvel creators Dave and Patty Cockrum. Dave Cockrum had sadly died 2 years previously, and Patty Cockrum, as far as I know, is still alive at the time of this video's creation. Yeah, there's nothing else I have to say. It's just a tribute to the two. They have no other actual story significance. In comic, they say farewell to Psylocke, saying they'll always be in her memories, despite her not knowing anything about them! Look, I'm not heartless. Both were close friends of Chris Claremont, and Dave Cockrum's passing was a tragedy. But they were put into this book with no explanation, and we're supposed to have emotional resonance with them leaving, but if they hadn't dedicated the final page of Die by the Sword to them, I wouldn't have known it was them! They played no part in anything. Their inclusion wasn't heartwarming, it was just confusing. But whatever. Exiles number 100. Big milestone issues like this should be a cause for a big event. Maybe a shake-up, or at least a celebration of where they've started versus where they are now. In some ways, that is the case, especially with Blink reflecting on how many they've lost along the way. But otherwise, a lot of it is just set up for what comes next. Sage apparently has some kind of war going on in her mind, a result of Die by the Sword. Nocturne's still working out the issues with her stroke. And as a result of that, Nocturne and Thunderbird decide to retire from active duty on Heather's world, continue the healing process there. Blink decides to go with them, needing a real break from this stuff. And thus Marvel decided, wow, a book that actually reached 100 issues! We don't have very many of those anymore! Well, let's start the numbering over again. Yeah, I know, number 1 issues are a good chance to attract new readers and get a lot more money than that, but come on! Like I said, it so rarely happens for any book in the modern era. It's why I'm so happy that DC, as part of Rebirth, reverted the numbering of Action Comics and Detective Comics back. They're almost at issue 1000. Lasting that long should be celebrated. And it helps that both books at the time of this video are really damn good. But yeah, behold the new era for the team. New Exiles! What's new about them? Nothing at all! Claremont is still the writer. The team at the end of issue 100 is the same team. The only other thing I could mention is an enjoyable one-shot called Days of Then and Now, written by a guy named Mike Reicht. It is very enjoyable, basically about a character named Quentin Quire who goes on a hunt for the Exiles, looking for help for his world that's been overrun by the Hulk, who in this reality took control of an event called the Annihilation Wave. Long story, as always. The point is, Blink actually helps Quentin assemble a team of heroes from other realities to come to his world and assist, since his world was one that got screwed over. The Exiles were supposed to save it, but they failed them because they were too busy hunting down Proteus. It actually feels more like a proper 100th issue than the real one, since it celebrates the history of the book and the various worlds they saved, checking in on several that they visited. But yeah, new Exiles, second verse same as the first. The first issue, though, does act as a bit of a jumping on point, giving an explanation of various characters and going into them better than anything had before. Sabretooth also provides new clothes for some of the team, including this ridiculous tube top and tight pants combo for Psylocke. Considering her previous outfit was basically a one-piece bathing suit, I'm not sure if she's technically wearing less or the same amount of clothes as before. Oh, and despite the fact that the Exiles know there's something that's wrong that needs to be corrected, they still don't know what that is anymore. So basically, the premise of the book is now, go into other worlds and trip over stuff enough times until everything's fixed. Claremont seems to simultaneously know and yet not know the history of the book, since while they make references to past adventures on occasion, he forgets that the Exiles were supposed to be fixing realities damaged by the Bug's actions. Now it's just generic, we protect the Omniverse and fix problems. Anyway, this world was devastated 50 years ago by a series of meteor strikes that caused tidal waves across the world, creating a new collection of kingdoms ruled by various figures, as well as a moon base because the moon is terraformed. It's a weird technology dichotomy that's suddenly introduced in the fourth issue and goes nowhere. It's here where we also get yet another new team member, a variation of Gambit. Only here, he's the son of Namor and Sue Storm, who in this reality is the only survivor of the Fantastic Four's spaceflight, the rest having been killed in the meteor storm. How is it that this feels even more fanficky than the original team? Sabretooth loses contact with those at the Crystal Palace and decides they need to go back and figure out what's up. Gambit asks to come with them to learn and hopefully help his world when he returns. When they get back to the Panopticon, it turns out, according to the computers, their mission was to recruit Gambit. And after a few issues featuring this brand new team, the New Exiles, it finally clicked in my head the big problem with Claremont's run. The characters are all so boring! There's nothing to these people. Claremont got rid of the majority of the cast to add in a bunch of newbies, and there's nothing to them. There are no personality clashes, no real development or seeing a wide range of emotions from them. Nothing really gone into about their backgrounds. No hard-fought battles of determination to show us they're badass. There's nothing in them that makes us want to care about them. Mystique. He actually uses his shape-shifting pretty infrequently, more tending to be there as the team physician and cook, since he's basically redundant when we already have a shapeshifter with Morph. Rogue has a cool look at the very least, but none of the angst of the main universe Rogue, and the cool look is lost later. The only memorable thing about her is that sometimes it's implied she's Japanese when she uses the word baka, and one time Baku, which is not the same thing. But that's it. Kat just appeared out of nowhere and refuses to give any details to the others, yet they trust her implicitly. I think we're supposed to care about Psylocke just because she's Psylocke, but her introduction was so badly handled, I don't get why she's here, and she has one plot line throughout Claremont's run, and it's dull and lame. And finally, the new recruit Gambit, who, I'm not joking, is Gambit in name only, because he doesn't look like Gambit, he doesn't have Gambit's powers, he doesn't have Gambit's backstory. So why did you call him Gambit? Oh, and like the others, he is not interesting. Be more interesting, damn it! Ah! The next issue shows what was happening at the palace. While Sage was fighting off creatures resulting from the memories downloaded into her, again, it's part of Die by the Sword and is her entire deal in the book. It feels like she barely interacts with the others in this thing. Kat discovers some kind of weird portal that opens up while she's examining the tech of the Crystal Palace. She's had an affinity for working with it during her entire stay. And they somehow end up in some kind of weird fantasy kingdom where Kat's appearance keeps changing to other universe forms of Kitty Pryde. Even stranger, this fantasy world has a bunch of technology ranging from biplanes to cell phones. Just like the other world they just visited, so it's really not even that cool a thing. We also see that Madame Hydra, the evil Sue Storm, whose backstory we never learned, is indeed alive and now traveling the multiverse recruiting people to her cause. For the Exiles' next mission, it actually has a purpose behind it. Wait a second, an alternate world where they're given a goal that we're told from the start? What new spore of madness is this? On this world, there's a war brewing between Imperial France and the British Empire. The world doesn't have nukes ready to fly, but it does have super beings who will be the cannon fodder of the war, so they have to stop it. However, there are a number of subplots also going on. Psylocke learns that Slaymaster, a villain she knew back in the regular Marvel Universe, and an ally of Madame Hydra, has been going from universe to universe, killing off every Psylocke in those worlds. She begins training to prepare herself for a confrontation with Slaymaster, while Kat, back at the Crystal Palace, detects that several other dimensions have begun to vanish, unable to figure out what's causing it. Sabretooth apparently knows about Madame Hydra's gang, as well as Slaymaster's goal of killing all the Psylocks, and for whatever reason doesn't tell the others, instead just going after them himself. Naturally, this is an incredibly stupid plan that almost gets him killed. The irritating thing is that the idea of Madame Hydra going through other universes and creating kind of like her own evil team of exiles or the like, it actually kind of sounds like a cool prospect. But it's so poorly thought out because the motivations of the characters are so stupidly simplistic. According to the recap page, she wants to do it because of the Exiles' interference in her past plans. Yeah, if you can call the Exiles getting their asses kicked repeatedly on that world interference. Slaymaster wants to kill all the Psylocks because he wasn't able to kill the Exiles' Psylocke. That's it! There's nothing compelling or threatening about this, and everyone's dialogue has serious problems. Claremont writes dialogue in the book just a bit too verbose. For example, Sabretooth is not a proper speaker. He doesn't have to be. He's a rough and tumble kind of guy without an education who grew up in a post-apocalyptic, play on words, world. So why is it that under Claremont's pen, his sentence structure changes? It's basically the difference between saying, I want a sandwich, and I would like a sandwich. If that makes any sense. It's not the words that are wrong, it's the way it's being said. Claremont's way of making Sabretooth seem less proper is for him to sometimes contract words with stuff like "spose" or "an" instead of "and." But that doesn't make him sound that much different than the others, who have the same overwritten way of talking. It's basically the kind of writing style you'd expect from 80s comics, and that'd be fine if this was an 80s comic, but it's not, so the style is jarring and feels wrong. Hell, I can give a positive example of this style being used. In case you hadn't heard, Rom is now back in action in IDW Comics. His original comic was written in the 80s, so it had that same kind of 80s writing style, and it worked for him. The IDW comic wisely kept him talking like he does in the 80s, while the other human characters actually sound like people from the modern day. It works for him because it's consistent with his character, even though it's a reboot and he's an alien. Here, the characters all talk the same way, and it's boring! Even Morph, despite still injecting comic relief visually, is talking like that. Hell, they all start using the word devil as a generic curse word, to the point where in issue 16, 2 different characters let out the expression, "The devil, you say!" instead of like, "Not on my watch," or "Never," or something. Confusion is now proclaimed with, "What the devil?" And look, I'm the internet reviewer who refrains from using more intense swearing, but even I say, "What the hell" on occasion. Never under Claremont's run. Anyway, back to the story. Kat goes to rescue Sabretooth, but somehow Madame Hydra has the ability to block them escaping back to the Crystal Palace. We finally learn Kat's backstory, although to be frank, it's not like she's done anything that made us want to learn more about her. She was a villain, sort of. A member of Emma Frost's Hellfire Club in her reality, but she never really fit in with them, ran away from X-Men villain Shadow King, and then accidentally phased through reality and into the Crystal Palace. Well, thank God we finally learned the shocking details of her past. I'm sure half of you out there were waiting with bated breath. The other half were going, wait, who's Kat again? We pick up on that whole Kat turning into other reality versions of herself, but the explanation doesn't really make much sense. Somehow, she thinks the collapse of the Omniverse is a result of the Crystal Palace. It's dying, and it needs someone like the Cockrams to take their place. Inside of it, doing something? I don't know. I don't know has quickly become the catchphrase of Claremont's run. New Exiles also had an annual issue that is frankly much more interesting to us. It's still written by Claremont, but its resolution on the whole Morph and Proteus thing. See, as has been pointed out by the characters a few times, Morph is effectively dead right now. It's just Proteus only able to access his memories. The world they come to has on it Valeria Richards, the daughter of Reed Richards and Sue Storm. But specifically, this one is from the Madame Hydra universe. She's looking for Madame Hydra, but hasn't had any success. This has nothing to do with anything, but she'll be back later. A godlike being called the Maker somehow reawakens Proteus, who decides to knock out the other exiles and do his thing. Only his own thoughts start getting mixed up, not helped by the Maker getting close to killing him. In his fear of not wanting to die, a shape reaches out his hand to him and offers him a chance to live. And Proteus accepts. It turns out it's the real Morph, who's basically been hidden away in his own psyche as a result of his own unique physiology. There's a part of Proteus that doesn't want to be a psychopathic killer, possibly a result of all the memories he's absorbed from others, like Mimic. So Morph offers him a chance for a better life. They share a body together, be a better person as one, or else they'll never be whole again. He accepts. It is, admittedly, a bit too pat of an ending for the Proteus stuff, especially considering we saw how deranged he was. But hey, it brings Morph back truly and creates some actual resolution, so yay. The next mission, and the final issues of New Exiles, brings us to a world where there are no continents, just scattered islands. There are also no superpowered beings, just cyborgs and Iron Man-esque heroes. The Sons of Iron and the Daughters of the Dragon. Just as your regular reminder that there are some universal constants, the Daughters of the Dragon basically all fight in swimsuits and thongs, while the Sons of Iron are all covered from head to toe. And yes, it's probably not that important to bring up for some random universe, but New Exiles is really, really dull, and I am desperate for anything to talk about. They encounter a Shi'ar Death Squad chasing after Deathbird, who in this universe is a good guy. The Death Squad includes this bug lady.
You speak, mammal, as if you know me.
Yes, bug lady, call more people mammals. What with your insectoid mammary glands? I dub this Earth Bikini Planet. Oh, but we also learned that the Sons of Iron are actually Saurians, basically a race of dinosaur people that also share this Earth. Because lizard boobs would just be ridiculous. Bug boobs, on the other hand, gotta have more of those. However, the follow-up attack by the Shi'ar is aided by Madame Hydra, who gets killed by Kat, phasing through her and grabbing her, spine? Tapeworm? I have no idea what I'm looking at. Whatever, she's dead and I don't care. Speaking of things I don't care about, Kat dies from the attack because of how much she had to put into defeating Madame Hydra. I guess she had this thing about wanting to be a hero to make up for being a villain? I think? Whatever. Being invested in characters is so old, Exiles. Psylocke defeats Slaymaster, who manages to escape, with Sabretooth exclaiming, "What the devil? This book can go devil itself." And in a backup story that's been going on for several issues, Sage resolves her problems and takes the place of the Cockrams that had been meant for Kat, somehow becoming the computer for the Crystal Palace. Rogue ends up romancing one of the Saurians, even though they know each other for, like, a day, and decides to stay on this world. Morph will also stick around for a while to help things out since this is one of the core worlds necessary for securing the multiverse, but he says he'll be back. In the meantime, the Exiles meet Valeria Richards again. She actually came to join the Exiles in their final issue, so good timing there. And we get a big montage of events that occur. Missions they go on. Gambit needing to become a king again on his own world when Namor dies. Sabretooth and Psylocke getting into a relationship. And it all screams of, this was all supposed to happen much later, but our book got canceled, so I'm cramming it all in here. But we are not done with Exiles. For you see, that was just the end of New Exiles. And thank God for it. Unfortunately, what was supposed to be a second volume of the book, a proper return to Exiles form, got reduced down to just 6 issues. Written by Jeff Parker, it's actually much improved over Claremont stuff, but it's not great. It was just getting started though, so given time, it might have been fantastic. It's a real shame it got canceled so early, and like the last issue of New Exiles, there was clearly a plan for things to play out over years that had to be condensed down for the final issue. Fortunately, they at least extended the book to double length for that explanation. Because of the nature of this iteration, I'm gonna skip the details and go just for the broader summary. A group of 6 gets assembled by the Time Broker, who here is Morph. The group includes Blink, who feigns ignorance of the Exiles concept. Like before, they're sent to worlds to fix problems, but by issue 6 they realize Blink isn't telling them the whole truth, and they manage to get access to the Talus to go to the Crystal Palace. There they learn that there are multiple Exiles teams in operation, commanded by Blink, Heather, Morph, and Nocturne. Somehow, they were all pulled back to the Crystal Palace to find the new Exiles embedded in the wall. And apparently Jeff Parker decided, you thought you knew retcons with this series? I'm gonna retcon every single thing you think you know about this setup. This retcon suggests that time itself is more like a crystal with facets. The more people go back in time, the more facets and fragmentations are made. You can't prevent fragmentations from being made, it just makes more. The best you can do is mitigate the damage to preserve a small part of it. The Crystal Palace isn't an actual physical place, it's just how their minds are interpreting everything around them. But once they become part of this area of time, they can't ever really go back to their own worlds. It just risks fracturing things even more. However, the multiverse is also cyclical and bending back upon itself. So the explanation for what causes the fracturing changes as the Exiles or whatever time travelers do alters things. Think of it as a big circle. They can alter one part of the circle, but all it does is come back around again. Sometimes it's the Time Broker trying to fix natural damage, and he's just the collective subconscious of a group of people. Sometimes it's bugs. And sometimes it's the Cockrams. However, the longer you stay in this area, the more you get absorbed into it, which is what happened to the new Exiles. Morph only survived because the area absorbed Proteus instead. Whoops! So much for that redemption arc, Proteus! The new group of Exiles decides to continue doing their thing, to keep trying to preserve timelines as best as they can. Heather came up with a solution for dealing with the whole kidnapping people like before, doing so at the moment of death. That way, their effect on their own timelines was at an end anyway. Blink intended to fake her own death with the team and then go training more teams, but now Nocturne will go with them on their next mission, while Heather starts getting another team member. This retcon, I don't like it. Don't get me wrong, it's imaginative, very complex, and shows some really advanced thinking, but I don't like the idea that ultimately the missions really are kind of pointless, since the job is never done and the Exiles can never go home again for very long. It feels like everything that came before was kind of pointless. They also don't address the fact that a bunch of their friends are stuck in a wall! For crying out loud, Blink, that's your father figure up there! Don't you even care? Ultimately, we do know that they get free of that wall, since some of them, like Sabretooth, end up back in their own realities, but it feels a bit heartless, and this final group of Exiles seem too casual in embracing all this explanation and their new lives together. And that's Exiles. Even during the good parts of it, it is not a perfect series, but I love it. I love high-concept stories like this, especially exploring the boundaries of what-if scenarios, seeing everything we know get turned on its head, of real risk of danger and excitement and romance among these characters. The first 89 issues of Exiles are really damn solid, and I highly recommend them. As for why I picked it for a retrospective, well, my introduction to Marvel was mostly animated series, Spider-Man, X-Men, etc. When it came to comics, I was a DC guy, with only a few single Marvel comics here or there read, no series that really got me invested in it, but Exiles was my first ongoing Marvel series that I actually got into. Despite the fact that so much of it was completely divorced from the main Marvel universe, it was my introduction to the Marvel universe. And people have asked me to do retrospectives on various series and characters, but honestly, I try to either look at stuff that I find fascinating, like ROM, or more importantly, books that have a big personal connection to me, like Blue Beetle or Teen Titans. And Exiles has a personal connection to me. It may not have always been the best series out there, but it was a book that let you see heroes be heroes, make tough decisions, and use the best parts of a very eclectic team to explore the infinite possibilities of existence. And maybe someday, we'll see the Exiles again in some other mirror universe. Next time, however, it's time for us to once again visit Solson Publications, a source of plenty of pain for this show, with Reagan's Raiders.
Tattooed teenage alien fighters from Beverly Hills. Other shows that have ridiculous names like that. Well, that seems like an oddly specific title for a comic.
VR Troopers, Superhuman Samurai Cyber Squad. Why am I reading this off of? Why'd you give me a receipt paper? You had to write on all the things you could have written this out. If you're writing on a receipt paper, you're a monster. God damn it.
What? Not everything needs to be a battle for humanity. Sometimes it's the battle between which hot anime guy I'm gonna date. The answer's all of them.
Right. Well, I did pick you up the lottery numbers while I was there. Oh, sweet! Oh, wait, I'm out of time. Wow, what a douchebag.
There isn't much time. Lives are on the line. I need to make a choice. Something that could change the course of humanity. Which support do I choose in Overwatch?